Hi everyone and welcome back to the multiverse of 100 plus data science project series. In this video, you will learn how to creating a MERN Stack AI project using Deepseek R1. So let's have a look our demo application first. So we're going to building here an AI code review applications using free and open source model. So you can also selecting here the file. You can select here any file regarding Python, JavaScript, C or C++. So let's clicking here the file transformer.py and click on open. Then you can see that the code is loaded on here. And if I click on here, this review code button, it will try to analyzing this code and it will giving me some kind of output. So let's wait for the output for the few seconds. Well, so you got the response and you can see here one thing tag. That's when you're actually using the Deepseek R1 model, latest Chinese AI model. And you can see that this is nothing but a code and our code is correct as well. So you can also give it here some kind of wrong code and our AI code reviewer also try to make it correct. But in here, it will try to actually improving this code. So it actually adding here some kind of device utilizations. In this code, I am not adding here any device utilization, just like the coda or the GPU. So to try to adding this on, you can see on here, just to go down, you can see that it will getting here some device. You can using here the coda if you have the coda, but I am not actually initialized in my original code that I actually uploaded. So it will also try to adding here some kind of improved code in Java, as well as the improved code in C and C++, as well as it will give me some kind of informations about the time and space complexity, as well as it will give me some kind of documentations about the PyTorch uh, official tutorial, as well as it will give me some kind of documentation about Java with DL4J and C++ with the egents and transformer paper as well, so that I can reading this out because our code is updated based on the transformers. So you can also editing the code on here. You can selecting all the code, you can deleting them. So you can that I can also delete them, and I can also running here my own code. So let's say def sum. Let's say I'm going to give it here. Let's say a b, and I am trying to returning here. Let's say returning here a plus b, and this is completely a wrong code. I just give it here the review the code and try to waiting for the few minutes or few seconds. It will give me the response. So well, it gave me the response again. Think tag, that's been Deepseek R1. And if I go down, you can see here it will try to improving the code. It will adding here the comma, as well as it will try to adding here some try and expect block, and also it actually improve the code in the Java, C and the C++, as well as it will give the time complexity, space complexity, as well as it will give me some kind of personalized learning link. So you can also clicking on here, let's say Python function. So it will just redirect to you the Python function link. So let's click on here and you can see define the function. So you can also read about the Python function on here. So in this video, we're going to creating here this AI code reviewer from scratch. So let's start our journey and try to creating here the backend first. And after that, you're going to creating the frontend part. But before creating the backend part, you need to also installing here the Node.js in our system. Now let's try to download the Node.js and try to install it in our system. So in order to installing the Node.js, just go on the Google and search Node.js. And the first link is appear. Just click on here and click on this download Node.js LTS. LTS nothing but called the long-term support version. And after downloading this one, just click on next. I mean installing the Node.js. And after that, just open here your command prompt just for ensuring that Node.js is installed. So you can type in here node b, and you can see that the version is nothing but b 20.13.1. That's my Node.js version. Now what I can do is simply going to go on our BS code and try to creating here a backend, and after that you're going to creating here our frontend part. Now let's create our applications. So first we're going to do the coding for the backend, and after that we're going to do the coding for the frontend part. So let's click on here and create a folder called backend. So here I'm going to writing all of the code about the backend. And for the front end side, I'm going to using here the React.js and the Tailwind CSS. Now let's go on here and click on terminal, new terminal. And now simply going to go to the inside the folder called backend. And now inside this folder, let's use here a command called npm init-y. So it will creating here a package.json file inside your backend folder. So if you click on here package.json, you have the information about your applications. We have your name, the version of the applications, also your entry point, as well as you have the author, license, and the description. You can add it to here. Now you're also installing here a package called Express. That's npm I Express. So it will installing this library, and using this library or package, we can creating here our server. So I am simply going to go inside this backend folder, and I'm going to creating here a file called server.js. Also, I'm going to creating here a folder called source. And inside the source, I'm going to creating here a file called app.js. So inside this source folder, we're going to creating here our models, our controller, our route, everything about our applications. And also we're going to creating here our large language model applications inside this source folder. And for this case, we're going to using here free and open source model, right? So let's go on here app.js and also recording here this express. Now the question is, what is this npm? Npm stands for Node Package Management. See, when actually installing this Express, you can see that it will creating here a folder called Node module. And inside this module, you can see several types of actually folder. And inside this folder, you can see here some kind of JS is written. So that's in package is nothing but the combination of the code which is already written by the developer. Okay, so you can using this out without any hesitations. So first we can simply going to creating here our server. So for that you can record here our express. Let's say require the express. Let's say express. And now store it inside a variable called const express. Now let's create an instance of that. So let's say express. And now let's name it as app. So this is nothing but our server. Now we're creating our server, but we are not running it yet. So in order to running our server, we're going to using here this server.js. If we want to export this, I mean, if you want to import this data from this app.js file, you need to also export this one inside our app.js file. So let's say module.exports is equal to app. As well as we can simply going to using this inside the server.js. Let's say required, and inside that you're going to go inside our source folder, and inside the source folder we're going to taking here our app.js. Now our app.js file is coming in our server.js. Now we can simply going to listen in this out. So this is our application. Let's say const app, and now we can simply going to listen in this out. Let's say app.listen. I mean running our server. So let's running our server into 3000 port, and it will also calling here on callback functions so that our server can listen. So it will taking one request and the response, and then is simply going to give it here on response. Let's say console server is running on port 3000, or you can also give it here the link on that. So let's also creating here one initial route on here so that you can also testing this out. Yes, our server is running, and you also are getting some response on our servers. So let's creating here a route. Let's say app.get, and we're simply going to give it here first initial route, and then we have our request and the response. I mean response and the request. Then inside our callback, we're simply going to sending our request. Let's say rest.send. Let's say hello world. Now this is our server, right? And before running this server, it also go inside our package.json file, and have to change something inside our entry point. So it should be the server.js. Okay. Now let's save it, and let's save it, and as well as let's save it. Now let's open the terminal, and now using a command. So let's say cd backend, because we need to go inside this backend folder as well. And then let's use here a command called npx nodemon. So it will actually running our server. So in order to testing our server, we're going to using here the Postman. So you can also go on here and you can install an extension of the Postman. Otherwise, you can using the applications called the Postman. Just you need to installing the applications in your machine, right? So let's open in the Postman and dismiss, and let's go on here, and you can give it here the URL. So our port is coming in the 3000. So you need to give it here, let's say HTTP, and we have the 127. You can go with here the 127, or you can give it here this 3000. Now let's click on send, and you can see here we can got in here and response. I mean we get on response called hello world. This is the response we actually getting on here. So let's say hello world Chando. So let's save it, and you can see here our server is also started. And if I click on to send again, and you can see here we got the response hello world Chandu. That's when our server is established. And you can see here is get method. Okay, you can see get method also the post, port, patch, delete, everything we have. Okay, no problem. We discuss this later. Okay, now you can see that we successfully creating our server. Now we need to integrate our AI to our applications. So for this case, you're going to using the Deepseek R1 model, or you can using the Llama model as well. So because we don't have any debit card, we don't have any credit card, we are a student still. So that's why you're going to using here free and open source model. I mean, which one is free to use? So that's why you're going to using here the Groq Cloud. Using Groq Cloud, you can access here the free and open source model. So let's go on the Groq Cloud first. So that's the interface of the Groq Cloud. You can just go on the Google and search for the Groq Cloud and sign up with your email. So you can see here this is the playground, and if I go inside its documentations, and inside its documentation, you can, if you go on the model sections, you can see the several types of free and open source model are available. So if I go down, you can see here we have also available for the Deepseek R1 model. So you can use this out. Now, how can you access in this out? So you can access it using this API key. Just go on the API key sections, and now let's create here the API key. Let's give it here a name. Let's call Express. You can give it here any kind of name, and let's click on submit and copy it our API key. Now let's go on our VS Code. And after that, I'm going to creating here a folder called services. So how are you going to creating here all the file, all the informations about the AI. And then I'm going to creating here a JavaScript file called ai.service.js. Okay, or let's say services.js. So now inside this file, what I can do is simply going to do the coding for the Groq SDK. So what is the Groq SDK actually? Groq SDK is nothing but one library which one is used in the Express or the Node.js. So using this one, you can accessing here the Groq Cloud API. But before that, it also setting up the API in our environmental variable. So what I can do is simply going to creating here a environmental variable. Let's call .env. And now inside this .env, we're going to creating here a variable called Groq API key. That's a Groq underscore API key, and pasting here our Groq API key that we copied from the Groq Cloud. And also need to stopping our server, and then until installing here a package called, let's say npm I Groq, let's say Groq SDK. This is the package that I'm going to using it here in order to creating here or in order to accessing here the Groq Cloud API. So this is the API. You can see Groq SDK. So you can write. So this is the package that's called Groq SDK. So you can also copy this out because you're already installing this out, right? Now I'm going to using this out, or you can read out about the documentations. So this is the package you can see just published 9 days ago. Just I'm recording the videos. This is the package called the Groq. Okay. So this is the package that you install that's called Groq SDK, just published 9 days ago. So you can go on here and you can copy this, or you can just typing here npmi Groq SDK. So you can write about the code, you can read about the code, you can do anything else on here. Now let's go on the VS Code. So this is the node package management that we install in our VS Code. That's called Groq SDK, just published 9 days ago. Okay, just I'm rating. So this is the node. So this is the node package management. So this is the node package management that you can see that's called Groq SDK. So this is the package that you use in the VS Code. I need to installing it and you're using here the Groq Cloud API. That's called Groq SDK. So you can copy this out on here, or you can typing here npmi Groq SDK, or you can also using this. Okay. So this is the Groq SDK node package managers. So this is the Groq SDK from the Node package management website, just published in 9 days ago. So you can copy this out, or you can type in here npmi Groq SDK. You can write about the documentations, how to use this one. So I'm going to go on the VS Code. So you can see here it is installing this npmi Groq SDK. I mean Groq SDK is installed. Now it's simply going to go inside the source folder and go inside the services, and you're already the file called ai.services.js. Now, what I can do, we're simply going to first configuring our Groq API in from our environmental variable. So let's say const Groq is equal to record. First, we're going to recording here our Groq SDK. Let's say Groq SDK. And after that, we're simply going to creating here one new Groq. Let's say new Groq. And inside that is simply going to give it here our API key. Let's say API key, and to getting here API key from our environmental variable. So let's using here process dot env dot Groq API key. Let's say Groq API underscore key. But before that, it also installing here a library or package called .env. So let's say npm i.env. Okay, so that it will try to accessing the data from these environmental variables. Also, you need to go inside our server.js file. Server.js file. Also, you need to writing here a code called require. So not here. You need to give it to here. Let's say require.env.config. Okay, so that we can using this env environmental variable form here. So let's go on here ai.services.js, and inside that we're simply going to using here this process.env.Groq API key. Now let us store inside a variable called const let's say Groq. So now let's creating here a functions called get response. Let's call functions get response, and this function is taking one prompt, which we're going to passing here as a parameter to our large language model. So for that, you're going to using the Groq, right? So let's say Groq.chat dot completion dot create, and inside that is simply going to passing here two things. One is called the message, and second one is called the model. So let's first passing here the model. So the model that you're going to using here, that's called the Deepseek R1. Let's go on here, and this is the model that you're going to using it here. Let's say copy this out, and I'm going to go on here and I'm going to pass it to here the model name. And after that, I'm going to give it here one message. Let's call message, and then I'm going to give it here two things. One is called the role. So let's say role. So role is nothing but the user. So role should be like that. So it should be go inside one curly bracket. So role is the users, and the content is the prompt that is passing from here. Also, this function is nothing but an async function. I mean asynchronous functions. So let's say async, because you need to wait for a few seconds or a few minutes to get the response. And also need to give it here one AUIT, and then let us store it inside a variable called, let's say, chat completion, like that. So it should be the const. Okay, so let's make the C at the capital camel case. Okay, now we need to also returning this. Let's say return the chat completions. Let's say chat completions dot choice. Okay, should be choice s or the zeroth index. I mean zeroth choice, and to taking the message dot content. And after that, we simply get exporting here our models. Let's say module dot export. So not model, actually function. Let's call get response. That's our functions. So this is the building block of our function, right? Now we're going to creating here the route, so that you can also accessing here this AI .services.js. I mean our large language models. So for that, I'm going to creating here a folder called routes. So here I'm going to creating here all the routes. So let's creating here a route for the AI. Let's say routes.js. Now inside this AI route.js, we first record here the express. So let's say record the express. So let's say express. So let's store it inside a variable called const express is equal to this one. And after that, we're going to be creating here our router. Let's say const router is equal to router. So this router, sorry, express your router, sorry. And then it's simply going to exporting here the router. Okay, let's say module.export the router. But before that, you need to also creating here one router. So let's say router.get. So to give it here on route name, let's get here, let's say get review, because this is one AI code reviewer. Let's say get review. And then to give it here one callback function. Let's give it here the callback function, which are taking on the request and the response. And then it also give it here like that. And after that, we simply going to take in the prompt. So what I can do, we can say that let's say const prompt is equal to request dot query dot prompt. Because we're using here the get method, so obviously you can getting the data as a query. If you're using here the post method, you can getting here the data about the body. Now to checking here if the prompt is empty or not. So let's say if the prompt is uh, empty, so you can just give it here an error called prompt is required. So otherwise, we simply going to take in the response. Let's response is equal to, okay, response. So response is equal to a what get response. The AI service that actually creating on here. Okay, so it also require this thing, right? So what I can do is simply going to require. So let's say requiring here the AI. So it should be the services, the AI services. So you can, let's say, store it inside a variable called const AI services. Let's say it should be services. So you can simply going to use it here. Let's say service, and we can use it here. Let's say await AI service, and inside that is simply going to passing here our prompt. So we can passing here it here, as well as you need to also make it here async, because you're using the await. Okay, because this is also one asynchronous functions. So we can get the response. Now we can simply go into send the response. Let's say res.send, and inside that you can passing here the response. Yes, we can do that, but this is not a good practice in the case of productions level. So you can simply go into cutting this out inside another folder called the controller. Because in the router, you just have the router. You don't have any controller. This is called the controller side. So what I can do, you can creating here a folder called controller. So you can controllers. And inside this controllers folder, you can creating here a file called ai.controllers controller.js. Okay, that's a controllers.js like that. You can do that. Okay, now inside that, what I can do is simply going to go inside our routes, and we're just going to cutting this out, and we're simply going to go inside this AI controller and pass it to here. As well as you need to also cutting this out, because it's not needed at all, because it's needed on here. So you can simply go into paste it to here, and then you can using here module.export we can give it here a name. Let's call it get response like that. Okay, so we don't need this out. So now this is nothing but our controller. Okay, this is our controller. Now you can simply go into saving this out, and after that we can calling it on here. We can call it to here in our route. I'm just going to creating here a submit file for that, just it. So you can simply go into record it. Let's say const AI controller is equal to AI controller. Let's say AI controller. It should be C, should be capital controller is required this controller and AI controller. So it will just give me some auto suggestion, just because of I'm going to using here the GitHub Copilot. That's why. So I'm simply going to passing here this AI controller dot get response. This get response is nothing but a function that actually created here. Okay, that you can see in our controller, we have the functions called get response. So that's our AI router. So you can saving this out, we can saving this out, and you can saving this out as well as these ones. Now what I can do is simply going to open our Postman. That's our postman. We okay postman, and then we need to also calling this out, right? We need to also calling this AI code inside our app.js. Okay, in our app.js, because we're not actually using this out. So it's also calling these things, right? So what I can do is simply going to using here app.use, and inside that you can using here, let's give it here one name that's called AI, and inside that you can simply going to using here this AI route. So it also require this one. Okay, so let's say require uh, this require this route and the AI route. Okay, because we're going to call in this the route from this route folder in our app.js. So this is nothing but our route. Let's say const AI route. So you can simply go into using this out. Let's say AI routes. So let's using this out. Okay, now it will set to do. So let's save it, and let's go on here again, save it, or you can just click here to save, tick mark on the auto save mode. So let's save it now again, and let's go on the postman, and now type let's first AI. Then we have the functions called get response or review. So let's say go on here, we have the functions called get review. So let's say review, that's it. And now it also give it here on prompt. So in our tree, because it will taking on prompt as a parameters. If I go inside that, you can see taking as a prompt as a parameters, I mean as a key. So to give it to here, let's say prompt, and then it also give it here on below. Let's call let's try to give it here one functions. Okay, let's try to passing here, testing this out, then we're going to testing it later on. So what is Python? And now let's click on send. Now it will give me some kind of response, and you can see that we don't get any response. So we don't get any response just because of we not running our server yet. So you need to go on here and go to terminal, new terminal, and after that, let's say npx nodemon. Okay, sorry. You need to also go inside our backend folder. Let's call cd backend, and then you can running here npx nodemon. That's npx nodemon. Now to running the server, right? So taking few seconds just to wait. Okay, yeah, server is running. So you can go on here, and now we can click on send and waiting for the response. So again, something error. So chat completions dot create, anything error on here. So we have the Groq dot chat dot completions. Okay, should be s, that's one bad. Now let's start our server again and try to go on here and click on send. So again, we don't get any response yet. So why? So bad request, server is running, property message is unsupported. Did you mean the messages? Okay, it should be the messages. Okay, again as okay, let's save it, and now let's click on send again. So finally we got the response. What is Python? So we got the response from the Deepseek R1 model. So that's why this think tag is nothing but called the self-realizations. I mean rethinking about, because Deepseek R1 actually using the reinforcement learning. So now what I can do is simply going to creating here the applications called the code reviewer, because you see that we're just using here the large language model. We don't give it here any kind of prompt. I mean, we don't give it here any system prompt, so that our large language model or our AI applications is act like as a code reviewer. So how can you do that? We can simply going to go on here, and inside that we can give it here a prompt called the system. So let's call give it here a role called system role, so that this is the system message for our large language model. And inside that you can give it here on content. Let's call content, and inside this content we simply going to give it here one prompt. If you don't know what is the prompt engineering, you can go and check out the videos about the prompt engineering in my YouTube channels. So let's give it to here and pasting here on prompt that I copied earlier. So I'm simply closing this out. So act as an expert in programming language. It also give it a comma as well. So who has read through many programming advice online for Python's, Java, C, and C++? So can you please help suggest improvement for it, the given Python code mentioning the existing code line by line with the proper and indentations, because indentation is important in the case of Pythons. And can you also convert the improved code version to the Java, C, and C++? So I want to just give it here on a Python code, simple Python functions, and try to testing this out. Okay. So let's format this document and try to go on here. And now let's getting here a file called test.py. And inside that, we're creating here a function called def sum. Just for testing purposes, let's call return. Let's get a plus b. I mean, I just give it here on wrong code. So I just copy this out and go on the Postman because our server is running, right? So inside this prompt, what I can do, I am simply going to give it here my code. So inside that, I have to give it here 3 code. So 1, 2, 3, and I have to pasting here the code. And now let's click on send. Now, based on my code, it will give me some kind of response. You can see it will give me some kind of response. You can see that it will first give me that you might be doing some mistakes. You can see suggestions. The function sum is defined without parameters. Yes, it's right. And also it will give me some improved code in Python. So what I can do, you can simply go copy this out and you can go the BS code. And after that, you can creating here a file called, let's call tam.md. And then you can simply pass it to here and you can go on the markdown preview and you can see it easily. Okay, just wait for a few seconds. So you can see it will previewing the tam.md file in the preview mode. So you can see that, all right, I'm trying to help you, the user, improve their Python code. The code that provided in the function is called sum. So it has some problem. You can see it has some problem. Suggestion is something called the function sum is defined without parameters, but it tries to use the variable as a and b, so which are not defined. Yes, it's true. The line return a and b is incorrect. Syntax for the string concatenations, it should be return the a plus b like that. Okay. So the improved code and also improved code in Java, C++, and Python as well as it will give the time complexity, and also it will give here some kind of personalized learning links. You can just go on the links and you can getting here the documentation of the Python functions and the Java method and C++ functions, C++ functions, C functions, the time complexity and space complexity. That's mean the problem is nothing but about the function, right? So that's it will give me some kind of personalized learning link about the about the problem statement that actually pass it to here to our language models. Cool, right? Cool. Now what I can do is simply going to designing our front end part right now because our code is ready. Our code is ready. Now we can designing here our front end part, and after that we can connect it to our applications, right? We can do that. Let's jump on here and try to creating here our React applications. So now it's time to creating here our front end part. So for this case, we're going to be using the React.js and the Tailwind CSS. So let's go to the terminal and click here to new terminal, and then creating here and React projects. So you can using here a command called npm create. We're going to using here the bit @latest, and then you have to give it here one name, project name. So we're going to give it here at the front end as a project name because we give it here the project name for the backend as a backend. That's why. So now we need to selecting here the framework. Let's select the framework as a React, and the variant is nothing but the JavaScript. So it will created the projects. So now we need to installing here our packages. So let's get npm I, but before that we have to go it inside the folder called frontend, and we can installing here node package management. I mean all of the packages that is needed to building here the React projects. So to creating here a folder inside this frontend, so which one have all of the packages, all of the coding part for the frontend applications. So it will take a few times. So cool, installing all of the node package management, I mean node module that you can see on that. It will creating here a folder called node module, and inside that all of the code is written. So we can now running our server. So let's say npm run dev, and it will opening this inside the local host. So you can click on here, follow link. Okay, now it finally loaded. You can see the bit plus React and also encounter applications. So now we need to configuring here the Tailwind CSS. So what I can do, we can go on here, this documentation, and we can copy this one. We can go on the VS Code terminal to stop the server and to pasting here this code that we copied from the documentations. And after that, into pasting here the configurations, this file inside our tailwind.config.js file. When you're running this terminal, in the terminal, it will creating here an config file for that. So it will taking obviously taking times because it installing here the Tailwind CSS as well as it actually configure all of the things. That's why. So now let's enter, and also it's better you can copying this one. Okay, it's easy. Don't worry about this link. I'll give this link in the description. You can just go and check out here, from here. Okay. So let's go on here, and it will creating here one tailwind.config.js file, and here you can pasting here the code that you copied from here. And also you need to also pasting here on code inside this index.css. So let's copy this one first because it is taking time. Yep, it's created. Okay, so you can just go on the source folder, and inside the source folder you have the index.css. So you're selecting all of the things and you're pasting in the code that you copied from the documentations. So you can copy this one as well. So you need to paste it inside the tailwind config.js, and then you can save it. And after that, you can now go to the terminal and run for npm run dev. So let's say npm run dev. So to running this one, and you can simply going to go on here and click on follow link. Now you can see that it will still loading. So yep, it's loading. The first time it will taking times. You can see that it's loaded. Tailwind is working, but you can also testing this out. So what I can do, you can simply going to go inside this app.jsx. But first, let's go on the app.css. So we can removing all of the code from here. And after that, you can go inside this app.jsx, and it also removing something from here. So let's start to removing this full fragment, and you're going to taking here one div. So let's say div, let's say hello world, let's say hello world. And after that, you can give it here the class name. Let's give it here a class name because you're going to be using here the Tailwind CSS. So let's say text 3xl. So you can see 3xl is working. That's mean Tailwind is working. So you can also removing this thing. It's not needed. We can also removing this thing as well. So we are not going to using here this app.css anymore. So you can also removing this input statement from this app.jsx file. Now what I need to do, we need to creating here one interface. Here we having one input box. Here you can taking the input from the users as a Python file or the JavaScript file or the C++ file. And also you can write in the code on here. And also we have a button here you can click, and after that it will giving some kind of review from our AI. So we are going to taking one div first. Let's say div, and inside this div we having one header sections. So here you can adding here one header, as well as we having one right part as well as the left part. So let's first adding here the header, and inside the header I'm going to give it here the header called AI code reviewer. Okay, let's say reviewer. So reviewer, it should be reviewer like that. So save it and go on here, and you can see AI code reviewer. Now after that we are going to give it here some kind of comment. So let's give it here one comment on here. So this is called header, and after that we are going to taking here two div. So one div nothing but for the left part, and another div is nothing but for the right part. So we have the two div as well. So let's taking the two div, let's call div. This is the for the left part, and another div is nothing but for the right part. So let's say div, and this is nothing but for the right part. So let's save it and go on here. You can see left part and the right part as well. So we can also wrap this inside another div. So we can wrap it inside another div. So let's taking another div. So we are going to wrap it inside that. So you can do cut this and you're going to paste it to here. Okay. And let's click on here and format the documents. And let's try to closing all of the things because it's not needed at all. So let's save it and go on here, and you can see the same thing as well. So now you're going to give it here some kind of a style inside our header. So we're going to give it here some kind of style. Let's say class name. So let's say class name. So let's say we're going to give it the full width. But before that, it's better we can styling here the entire container. That's the entire div, because it's nothing but entire div. And inside this entire div, we have another div. And inside this div, we have the left part and the right part, as well as we having one headers. So you can also give it to the class name inside that first. Then after that, you're going to designing here the header part. So you're going to first make it as a flex, and after that, you're going to make it as a flex call. Flex column. And also you're going to making the item should be the center. Let's get items in the center, and as well as we're going to give it here one minimum height of the screen. So let's say minimum height of the screen, and as well as we're going to give it here on background color. Let's get background gray of, let's say, 900. As well as we're going to give it the text, all of the text inside our container should be the white color, and you're going to give it here the padding of the 6, and also giving here some kind of gap. So let's say gap equal to 6. So you can see that it's look like that, AI coder, left part and the right part. So it's coming inside that. Now in the header you can also do the designing. So in the header part, what I can do, you give it the width as a full, and you're going to give the text to be the center, and it's better you can closing this out center, and then you're going to give it to the padding of the y sections of the 4, and you're going to make it the text is a 3xl, and the font is bold. Let's say font is bold, and then you're going to give it here on gradient color. Let's say gradient to, let's say, to r, I mean from the right, from below. So let's say from below, we're going to using here, let's say from below 600. So let's say 600, and as well as you're going to give it here to purple. So let's say to purple. So let's give it here purple as a 600, and after that we can also give it here some kind of shadow, so for the large devices, and as well as you're going to give it here some rounded lg. So let's say rounded lg. So let's see. So this called AI code reviewer that you can see. So you can save it. The bg gradient is not working. So okay, bg gradient is not working. Let's go on inspect and see that in the consoles we have some kind of errors. Okay, we can simply going to go on here and checking again. Text is center and padding is nothing but the y, and text xl font bold, and to give it to here, so let's give it a bg gradient to the right, and from blue it should be not from blue to purple. Now it will be working, I hope so. Yeah, now it's working, you can see that. Okay, AI code reviewer. So you can also add it here one kind of emoji in here. We can also add here one emoji. So you can opening here your emoji panel, and you can give it here, let's say give it here this one AI code reviewer like that. So you can go on here and checking that we have one robot types of actually emoji. Now let's try to do the coding part for the left part and the right part. So in the left part, so we have the two things. One is called the input button. I mean, we can also upload the file, as well as we having one editor sections. So let's try to do the first to the right part. Then after that, we're going to do the code for the right part, left part as well. Okay. So let's try to give it here first some property inside our parent div. So let's get class name. So let's say class name. Let's give it here flags, and flags is nothing but the row right now, because you can see that it's nothing but in the column side to making as a row. And then we can also give it here some kind of gap. So yep, it's gap of 6, and you also give it here the width as a full, and the maximum width is nothing but the 6xl. You can give it to here. So that is right now like look like that. So we can now do the coding for the right part first. So in our right part, what you have, we just having one review boxes. So in here, what I can do is simply going to designing this one. So let's say class name. So you need to give it here width of the 1/2, because this is one single part, half part, and this is the another half part. So you give it here width as a 1/2, and also height is nothing but the full height. And then you're going to give it here bg of the gray, let's say 800, and then you're going to give it to the padding of the 6. So let's see padding of the 6, you can see that. And then after that you can give it here rounded lg, so that it look like the rounded shape. You can rounded shape. So you can also go on the full screen mode as well. And then we can also give it here some kind of shadow. Let's call shadow. We can give it a shadow lg, and you also give it here some kind of border, and you also give it the border dot gray. Let's give it here the 700, and we can also give it here the overflow is auto if you have some overflow problems. So you can see it look like that. So you can also testing this out. Let's say lorem like that. So you can see that it will also increasing the size based on the content. Now you can simply go into copying this thing, I mean copying the class name from here, and you can also pasting the same thing inside the left part as well. So let's say class name, so class name, and we can paste into here. So we can also add it here two things. Let's say lorem, let's say 150, and you can see that it's this content is also look like that. Now in here, adding here on button for file uploader, as well as you need to also having one editor so that you can also edit. Okay, as well as we need to also having one button called review so that you can review the code is given by the users. Okay, so we can simply going to go inside that. We can format the document, and then inside that we can removing this thing. It's not needed at all as well. Okay, so let's give it a left as well, and this one let's say right. Okay, so in the left part, what you have now, we having one simple button, and as well as we having one code editor. So let's first adding here the things called the file uploader. So let's say it's nothing but the file uploader. Let's say it should be the file upload button. Okay, let's say button. So that's it, and it also give it here one static sign. Okay, so we can using here an input tag. Let's say input, and we can give it to the text as a file, and it will accepting here accepting here, let's say accepting. Okay, accept, we can give it here, let's say .js, .py, and let's say .css, also let's say .cpp, I mean the C++, or you can give it here, let's say .cs or .ts, let's say .html to take the HTML file, also .css, you give it to CSS, right? And also let's say JSON, let's say .java, like that. Okay, and also to give it here one class name. So let's say class name, so that it's look better. Okay, so let's go on here checking for that. Now that's our file uploader file. We can click here to choose file. So let's selecting here this one, transformer.py. I click on open, and you can see that it will load it. Okay, we can also do some designing on that so that it look better, because it's look ugly right now. So we can give it here some kind of class name. So let's say margin of the bottom, so you can give it some margin bottom side of the fold, and text is nothing but a small, and then text gray, let's say gray, let's say 400, and then we can give it to the rounded lg, let's say rounded lg, and then you can make in the cursor is a pointer. So let's say cursor. Okay, it should be cursor, should be the pointer, and you can give it the bg of okay, we give the text gray. Okay, bg gray, we can also give the bg gray of 700, as well as we can give it some padding and rounded lj. So now let's checking it here. Okay, rounded lgs. Okay, rounded, we give it to the rounded lg already, so we can removing this one. Okay, so it should be the rounded lg. Now let's save it and go on here and check that it's now look like that. Okay, so let's format the document and see this one. So margin bottom of the fourth, and give the text as small, and clear up the 400, and cursor is a pointer, and also give it here the padding and also rounded lg. So if I click on here, you can see it is pointer right now. Okay, pointer, right? Now it's also adding here our code editor, so we can also add it here. So let's say give it here on actually comment, let's say code editor. So actually using the GitHub Copilot, so that's why it auto suggesting. Okay, so now inside that, what I can do, you can also taking here on another div. That's taking one div, and inside this div, I just give it here one class name. That's called class name. We can give it here one border, and you can give it here border of, let's say gray, let's say 600, and then you can using here rounded lg, and padding of the 4, and bg gray of 900, same thing. Okay, so you can see that it look like that. Okay, So you can also check it this out just for adding here some kind of lorem ipsum. So let's adding here lorem, let's say 200. So you can also checking this one. Okay, it's look like that. Okay, so we can also adding here some kind of button. So we can also add it here in button so that you can also review. So let's add in here on buttons, and inside this button we can give it here and actually text calls or review code. So you can also give it here one emoji. So let's give it here this emoji. So you can see this review code look like that. So now you're going to give it here some kind of actually styling. So class name. So you can give it here width as a full, and then padding y of the 3, and text is LG large, font let's say semi bold, and then let's give it a text is a white, and then bg of gradient from the right side. Let's give it here the from blue to purple, the same thing from blue, let's say give it here blue 500, and to purple, let's say purple the 600. And after that you can also give it the one hover. So let's say hover from purple, let's say 500, and also hover to, okay, so let's say hover to blue, uh, 600. You can give it to here. As well as you also can give it here some kind of shadow, as well as you can also give it here some kind of durations for the transitions. So you can give it here the rounded, let's say rounded LG. So it look like that, rounded LG, but the hover effect is working, but the scaling is not actually working. So it also give it to the scaling. So we can give it here first shadow. So let's say shadow of LG, and you can first now give it to the transform, and then you can give it to the transitions, and now to give it the duration. Let's give it the duration as 300, and then you can hover this one, and it should be the scale of let's say 105, and also hover, and the shadow should be the Excel. Okay, let's say shadow should be the Excel. Okay, like that. Quite big, I know. So format the document, and now it look like that. We can go on here, and you can see that how it look like. So it's better. You can also give it your margins. So you can give it your margin. Let's call empty top of the 2. So we can give it to here like that. So margin at the top of the bottom. So margin top. So okay, look like that. We can give it here the 4. Okay, now it's look good. So that's our front end part, but the problem is you can see that we unable to actually editing the code. Okay, but when actually clicking this upload file, the file should be uploaded, but it not replicated inside here. So what I can do, you can simply going to creating here a function so that you can also handle in the file issue. So for this case, we're going to using here a function. I'm creating here a function. It's a functions, let's say handle upload, file upload. Let's call handle file upload. So it will just taking one event, and then inside that you can first checking for the file. So let's say event dot target dot files of let's say 0th, and this is nothing but our file. So let's say const file, and then it also checking that if the file is coming or not. So let's say if the file, if the file is coming, that's been file is here, we can simply going to read it, and for that case we need to actually creating here a reader. So let's say const reader is equal to new reader. Okay, let's call file reader. It should be the file reader, and then we're going to read it. Let's say reader dot unload, and inside that we're going to give it here our code. So because this is changing the state, it will change the state because you're going to uploading here and file it also upload replicate inside our code editor, this editor sections. So it also using here one state, and it also actually manage the state. So for this case we're going to using here to creating here a state. So what I can do to creating here a state, let's call const, let's say this is for the code, and let's say set code, and then we're going to add it here one use state. So we can simply go into using this one. So let's say set code, and inside that you can using here this e dot target dot result, and then you're going to reading this out. So you can using here, let's say reader dot read as text, and we're going to passing the file. Now our file is, I mean our actually what is called, our function is created. So now we can simply going to calling this out. So when the actually file is uploaded in the sections, we can also give it here one on chains. So let's give it here on chains. So on chains, and inside that we can passing here our functions that we created, handle file upload. Now it will uploading, I mean handling the file sections. So if I go on here, and if I selecting in the file sections, and let's selecting here this transformer.py, and you can see that it not replicated inside my editor. So what I can do, we can simply going to replicate it inside our code editor. So we need to also passing these things, I mean passing in the code that we actually uploaded. So what I can do, you can simply going to give it to here, let's say code, I mean this code, okay, this code that you created. So you can simply going to save it. And now if I am going to upload it, you can see the code is uploaded yet. So if I'm uploading here another one, let's test.py, then you can see it will actually upload the code. Import numpy as np class is irrigation like that. But the problem is the code is look like ugly, it's not formatted yet. So for this case, what I can do, it also formatting this out, right? So it also installing here some kind of library. So what I can do, we're simply going to installing something important library. Let's go to the terminal, new terminal. So we can also using this terminal as well. So you can stopping this, and then you can run it later on. So again, installing here npm I, and also one more thing that you can see that we are unable to actually editing anything on here. That's one also problems. So again, installing here the first the React Markdown. That's called React Markdown, and then you have the React simple code editor. Let's say code editor, and then you have the rehype highlight. So let's say HIGHI highlight, rehype highlight, as well as we have the prims prism.js, as well as the xos, so that you can also calling the API that you created in the backend server. So let's enter it will installing here these things. So the React Markdown, a React simple code editor, so that you can also do the editing in the code. And you also have the rehype highlighted, so that it will highlighting the code, as well as we have the prims.js, so that we can also styling the code for coding matter, because in the prims.js the JavaScript libraries are available, not Pythons. So that's not a big deal, but the code is still formatted. So you can using here the JavaScript one, because Node.js it itself a JavaScript library. So well, the installing is I mean completed. Now you can using this one. So let's try to running our server first. Let's say run dab, and then you can closing this out, and you're going to importing here the all of the things that you actually installed. So what I can do first, you're going to import at the editor. So let's say editor, from the React simple, I mean React simple code editor. Let's say from React simple code editor, and import here. Let's import the prims, let's say prims from prims.js, and then we're going to importing here the markdown. Let's say markdown. So markdown, okay, markdown from React Markdown, as well as we're going to importing here the rehype. Let's say rehype. So it should be rehype highlight. So it should be rehype highlight from the rehype highlight, and as well as we're going to importing here the axios. Let's get axios from axios, and then it also adding here one simple snippet for the prisms. So you're going to import it to here. Let's import here the prisms. Let's say prisms JS, and you have the themes and prism tomorrow. You can use in these ones, the CSS one. And from this rehype highlight, you're going to importing here. Let's say highlight. So highlight JS, and we have the style of atom one dark. You can give it to here. Okay. So that's it. Now we are going to using this one. So let's save it and go on here and just waiting for the output. So let's see we got any error or not. Okay, no error, it is still loading. So we also need to actually using here the use effect. So you can using here the use effect, because we're going to using here the uh, prism JS is needed at all. So it's loaded, you can see that. So if I uploading here a file, so still it will not formatting the code. So what I can do, you're going to closing this out, and we can simply going to go inside the code editor first. So we can simply going to go on the code editor, and inside this code we are going to adding here one editor. So let's say editor. So editor, this editor, and inside this editor we're going to give it here the value. Let's give it to the value. Okay, let's removing this first. It will give the auto suggestions, I hope so. Editor. So, and then inside that you can give it to the value as a code. So let's give it to the value as a code. Now if I see that, just a wait few seconds. Okay, save it, and it's still loading, I hope so. Okay, I have to reload it. Anything wrong, server? Okay, let's try to do the coding part, and after that we're going to reload it, because it will taking few time to loading all of the things. So let's try to do the coding part first, then after that we're going to loading this out. Okay, so then you're going to give it here the value chains. So let's say on value chains. So let's say on value chains, and you can pass in here the code itself. So let's say code, and then you're going to do the set code. Let's say set code. That's been how actually writing the code in our editor, so that it will also set it, and as well as to also give it here the highlight. So let's say highlight. So let's say highlight, and inside this highlight you're going to using here the same code. Let's say code, and you're going to using here the prism.js. So let's say prism, and you're going to using here the highlight. So let's say highlight, and you're going to passing in the code, and you're going to using here prisms dot language dot, let's say using the JavaScript. Okay, so Python is not supported at all in here, so again using the JavaScript. So let's say JavaScript. So Java, oh, not Java actually, JavaScript. And then we can simply going to give it here some kind of padding. So let's give it here padding of, let's say 10, and then you can give it here some kind of style. So let's give it a style and give it here the font family. So let's say font family. Okay, it should be font family, and inside the font family we can give it here, let's say fire code, let's say monospace. Okay, and you can also give it the font size. Let's say font size, let's give it here 16. Now let's save it and go on here and see that. Okay, let's click on, and now let's selecting here this transformer.py and click on open. Now you can see that it will formatting the code. Okay, cool, right? You can see how long is it. If you don't know what is transformer, you can also go and check out the video of the transformer in my AI conceptual coding from scratch series, and I already discussed about what is transformer and how can you building on transformer from the scratch. Now you can see it really working very fine. You can also editing the code on here. Okay, you can see that you can also delete it. You can delete it. You can delete it. Okay, it's not deleted. Okay, okay, we are unable to delete it. So let's try to reload it first. Okay, and now let's say def. Okay, we are unable to actually writing the code on here. That's one problem. We are unable to typing here anything else. Okay, so what I can do, we can simply go into do some changes on here. I hope so maybe some problem in here. So you have the value on change value is nothing but the code, and you're going to setting the code. You need to adding here the code as well. So let's say add code. That's why the problem is actually. So let's say def. Now you can see we can also write the code. Let's say def sum, and then you can give it here. Let's say return. Let's say returning here a plus b like that. Okay. Now when the user is clicking this review code, it will reviewing this code and try to giving here some kind of answers in this right sections. So when the user is clicking this review button, so some kind of things should be the happening. So for this case, also creating here our review method. I mean, for the prisms, and also the prism is not highlighted at all. So you can also using here use effect. So use effect, and inside that you can using here this prism.js highlighted. So you can use it here. Let's say prism. Let's say prism.js prism dot highlight all. So highlight all. Okay, cool. Now we're to creating here functions uh, which are actually taking the data from our backend server. So it's also running our backend server. Also, one more thing, if I go into this backend server, in the source, in the controller, AI controller, you can see that's our controller. And in the controller section, it also actually making this as a body, because you're going to giving here one post request on here using the Axios library. So to go it inside this route, AI route. So you're having the get review, and in our services, you need to also do changes or not, no changes. So you need to just changes inside this controller. So it should be the post. So you can saving this out, and it also give it here one thing inside your app.js jax. So you can give it here, let's say app.use. So let's say app.use. So you can using here express.jsons. So now you can using here the body instead of using here the get methods. So now it also running our server for the backend. So you can go on here and let's say npx nodemon. But before that, you need to also go to the server. Let's call backend, and then you can using npx nodemon. Now our backend server is also running. Okay, it will taking time actually, and that's our front end part. Let's see the front end part. So yeah, that's our front end part, right? Now it's also integrating here our AI in our front end part as well. So let's go on the app.jsx, and then we can deleting this out now. So we can simply go into creating here functions. Let's say functions. Let's say review code. Okay, review code, and it is nothing but an async functions. So we can give it here as async. So let's say async, and then to take a response from Axios. So we can give it here. Let's say Axios dot post, and you can give it here. Let's say HTTP, and you can give it here. Let's say HTTP localhost. Okay, it should be localhost. It should be the 3000s, and you have the AI underscore get review, and then inside that you're going to passing here our code. So you can passing here the code. Then what I can do is simply going to actually set the response to our state. So it's also creating a state. Let's call const, and you can give it here. Let's say review and the set review, and just make it as a null string. And then you're going to add it to here. Let's call set review, and you can adding here response dot data that is coming from our servers. And after that, you're going to add it to our button. So in our button, you're going to add it this review uh, functions. So we can give it to here. Let's say on click. So you can give it here. Let's say on click, and inside that you're going to using here this review code method. This method. Now we can simply go into saving this out, and we are not using here this rehype height line. Okay, you know, also using this one inside our right part. Okay, let's try to ignore it right now. So when you're running this code, then you can see that why you need to using this markdown and this rehype height line. So let's save it, and now let's go on here. But before that, let's start to checking here our server. Yep, our server is running. So let's try to give it here on code. Let's say def sum, and then I'm going to give it here. Let's say returning here a plus b. This is a wrong code. So let's click on review code. So let's go on here and go on here. So we having some kind of error, I hope so. So we have some kind of error. We got so many error, I hope so. Yeah, no error, no error, no error. But if I'm inspecting this one and go on the console, and you can see that it will uncaught in promises XUS error. Okay, so response is not defined in the review code sections. So why this problem actually happened? Because it also giving here some kind of permissions to the backend server so that our front end can also using this one. So to go inside this backend server, and then to adding here one line. But before that, it also installing this out. So it is stopping our server, this server, and it is installing a package called course, and then it also adding the course inside our backend server. So we can using this one. Let's say you're going to using this one. Let's say on here. So we can, let's say, const course. So we also using here record the course, and we can using here the course in our applications. So you can using here, let's say, app dot use course. Okay, and then you can also using here, let's say, app dot use, and also you can using express URL encoded extend equal to true. So you can save it, and now we can running our server. Let's say npx node now let's waiting for the output. So let's see any problem inside our backend. No problem. We can go on the inspect and go on the console. Now you can see internal response error. Okay, so you can removing all of the things right now, and you can reload it. And then if I checking for the server, yes, our server is also running. Now let's try to give it here one code. Let's say def sum. So let's give it here the return. Let's say return, let's a plus b, and let's click in here the review code. So let's see we got any error or not. Inspect and console. So we're having some bad response error. So the problem actually happening just because of we actually using here one asynchronous functions, but we are not going to passing here the await. So that's why this bad request, as well as we passing here the code. But if I go inside this AI controller.js, you can see here we passing as a prompt. So you can also making it as a code. So let's making it as a code, and you can also changing this one as a code, and this one also the code. So you can save it right now, and you can checking the server. Yes, server is also running, and we can now go on here, and you can now write in the code. Let's say def sum, and then we can simply going to returning here. Let's say return a plus b. So now let's review the code and waiting for the output. So let's click on here to the review sections. Okay, not inspect, it's coming. You can see here we getting the output. The problem is it's not actually it's not actually formatted. So you need to also formatting this code as well. So what I can do is simply going to go inside this app.jsx. Let's closing these ones, and let's start using here this markdown as well as this rehype highlight. So we can use it in the right part sections. So we can simply going to pass it inside our markdown. So we can using, let's say, markdown. So there's markdown because we already imported to the markdown, right? Markdown, and inside the markdown we're simply going to give it to the rehype. So let's say rehype highlight rehype plugins, and inside this plugin we're going to give it here this rehype light, and we can also give it here on class name. Let's say class name, let's say we can give it here, let's say text gray 300. Let's say text gray 300. Now let's save it, and you can also give it here one actually testing code as well by default. So let's give it here, let's say dev sum, and then we simply going to give it here one dot, and then we can simply going to give it here one backslash n, and then we're going to returning here, let's say return here, let's say return here, let's say 1 plus 1. Okay, let's say a plus b, wrong code, and then you can give it here the next line. Okay, So if I saving this out and if I go on here, you can see that code is appeared. If I click on this review code button, then you can see it will try to it will give the output, but the code is not formatted yet. So it also formatting this thing, right? But we added here the uh, markdown, but it's not markdown yet. Why? So anything wrong? So using here this rehive highlight, as well as we use here the markdown the review. So let's try to save it and go on here and see this. So it's not markdown yet. If I checking this tag, this deep tag, so in the review we need to also adding here the markdown, so you can cutting this out and you can paste it to here. That's why the problem is actually. So let's go on here now, and now you can see it formatted, and you can see that it will give the output. Let's say this is the actual code. It will try to actually correcting this out and improve it code in Java, C, and C++. That you can see Java in the C, in the C++, as well as it will give the time complexity and the space complexity, as well as it will giving here some kind of links. So I can also click in this link. I can, let's say, clicking here the Python function. So you can see it will actually opening here the Python functions. Okay, because the problem is actually based on the Python function. That's why. So now let's click on again, and then we can actually open it in the next the another one. So you can open in a new link as well, or you can also clicking this out. So if I clicking this Java method, it will actually creating here the official documentation for the Java method, because our problem is nothing but about the method. So now let's click here to choose file, and let's select here the transformer.py, and then let's click on submit. This code is correct. I just click here to review the code for checking the code. So let's see what kind of response we got. So we got this kind of response. uh, okay, so it will just giving here the same code. No, it not give the same code. So you can see that improve it code, it will just give it here some improved code for the readability. So you can see that it will adding here the batch handling, the memory efficiency, the device handling, GPU or the CPU, but we are not adding here GPU and the CPU in these cases. So you can see that how fast and how quickly it will give the response. And you can see device actually using the code. We can initialize the devices, and it will also give it here the code in the C and C++ as well. You can see it also give the C and C++ code. See how cool. It will giving here some kind of documentation about the PyTorch and deep learning optimizations, the Java deep learning and code programming. See how cool this AI code generator actually review code review actually work. Okay. So that's it for today now, and hope you enjoy this full tutorial, and make sure to subscribe to my channels. And if you need any MERN Stack projects, so you can just comment below, so that I can also creating here this kind of more interesting projects about the GNAI and the MERN Stack as well. So thank you and bye bye.